Hello dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Paul M. Bradley's Psychic Café. We don't have any sponsors for the show, and likely never will, probably, but I'm just going to make up some of my own. This episode of Paul M. Bradley's Psychic Café is brought to you by Burning Johnson's Burning Emporium. Some people say there's too much burning in this world, but Burning Johnson disagrees. With his huge collection of lighters, flamethrowers and gasoline cans, they have everything the budding arsonists will need to get their glorious hellfire off the ground. So come on down to Burning Johnson's Burning Emporium and start your beautiful inferno today. Well, we've got a wonderful episode for you today, another episode with the wonderful Sam Sibiowski, a fantastic friend of mine. We're talking about the power of stories to change the world, and it gets quite spicy along the way, but it's okay, I trust you. I trust you and your beautiful mind to be able to cope with what is probably insane nattering, at least on my part. Sam, of course, can do no wrong. Anyway, without any further ramblings, may I present to you the wonderful Mr. Sam Sibiowski.
It's time.
This is Paul and Bradley's Psychic Cafe. Doo-doo-doo. It's episode 2. Sam is still here. He won't leave. He refuses to leave. He's been camping on the floor in this cafe, waiting for the day to talk about more stories and stuff. How's that for an opening?
Yeah, get out of me, you bloody freeloader. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very organised, very planned episode of Paul M. Bradley's Psychic Cafe. I'm joined here once again by Mr. Samuel James Sibiowski, and we're talking about stories. So I suppose to start off with, I was just reminded of the thing that you mentioned last time, as you were saying that, you know, we are we're less like Homo sapiens and more like Homo narrator, storyteller man, and I thought that was quite an interesting perspective, because it's the idea that human beings are it's literally stories that shape our reality, and I thought that'd be a good sort of thing to talk about on this particular day. And I was just wondering, you know, what's your thoughts on that? Because I find, you know, as I sort of grow more sort of inquisitive looking into things, I'm finding increasingly that stories are not just the stuff we have in books or movies and stuff. That stories are essentially just the way that we order information.
I think narrative is the driving force of communication, and the way, maybe even the driving force of memory and elements of personality. It's an identity. A person's identity is the story of their own lives that they tell themselves.
Yeah,
it's a very huge thing.
Yeah, I mean, you do that, don't you? Because I mean, you don't just, when you take in a memory, you don't just, you know, think, oh, I went to this cafe, and you don't just list the literal things, like everything you ordered and you know, how much you paid, because that's all irrelevant junk. What you remember is the core.
Some people do, but
yeah, oh god, yeah, man, some people actually really. Have you heard the guy, it was I don't remember who, it was a guy who was really was able to recall everything. You give him any date that he was alive on, and he will actually tell you exactly what happened during that day.
Really?
Yeah. It's actually a condition that people have, where their memories are so hyper powered that they're able to recall you give them any date and they'll be like, yes, that was a Tuesday. I woke up that morning and I had eggs and bacon. Even if it was like 20 years ago, they can still give you precise details. Which...
It's like the ideal witness in a murder.
yeah. And it's quite weird. But for most people, the way that we order information is much more squishy. It's much more fluid. We tend to, construct little, as you say, little narratives around, well, I was in this kind of place and I was feeling this, and oftentimes it doesn't always sync up with reality, but you get a kind of it creates a sort of general flow of these stories. So if storytelling really is at the heart of who we are and what we do, then in that case, storytelling is one of the most powerful things you can do, because you are literally, you can create a order of events that can influence the way people see things, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I think it's something we see happening in the world all the time right now.
Yeah. I mean, on the micro level and the macro level. I mean, on the micro level, I certainly recall, like, when I was remembering a particular time. There's like one day when there was like, some days when I remember it as this wonderful, extravagant, beautiful thing where I was meeting all these new people. Oh my God, I can see your face.
No.
All of a sudden your face
just
just
the
appeared.
face cam just kicked in.
Yeah, your face cam's just... It's woefully out of sync with the audio, but it's close enough. Sorry. Yeah. I know.
Never mind. Keep going.
I know what you mean, though, because there are times when I'm recalling a certain time in my life, and I can see... I can imagine it being, it was this wonderful, beautiful time when I'm meeting all of these people and I'm having such a great time and everyone was so lovely and accepting and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden another memory will intrude and it almost poisons the rest of the memory, because then I remember, no, my mind was not in a good place when that was happening. I wasn't feeling this, and all of a sudden, and of course the opposite can happen. You can have what was at the time a very bad memory in retrospect become quite sweet. And it's almost like, the present, the way that we order those events in the present retroactively affects the way that we feel about things.
I think you've just described the message of the movie Inside Out, but yeah, it's true.
I haven't seen it. I'm not. I haven't seen a Disney film in ages, except for all the.
It's a great film.
I've heard it. I've heard it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think and as I say, you can see that happening on all levels. Like, I think really the biggest purveyor of stories right now, and this is my example. One of my examples of how stories can often be used badly. When you misuse the power, it's the news. I find the news increasingly, if you just consume loads of news, what you're essentially doing, you're sitting down in front of your telly and you're having these narratives spewed at you, and they, even if you don't take them seriously, even if you just take them with a grain of salt and it's just the news, it's just this and this, it implants a little idea in you. It implants certain spores that start to grow. And I think a lot of people, the way that the news is structured, because obviously it's designed to get your attention, because a lot of the news is supported by advertisements, and what gets eyeballs on you other than fear, panic, danger, it's in bright red text. You've got the big bong to get people to snap their attention right in one direction, and you will have these these stories spewed at you. And of course, you know, I'm not going to suddenly start decrying fake news didn't happen and all that stuff. That would be, you know, I have faith that even the most biased news in the world, with the possible exception of like some out and out like propaganda pieces, most news reports what happened, but it's more in the case of how they report it that is the danger. It's the storytelling element of it. Anyone can report facts, but you have to... Sorry.
I remember a news story I saw a little while ago that I don't watch the news very often,
Me
but
either.
this one kind of reaffirmed what I fear about the news in general, because it was an interview with like the London chief of police about something that was I think it was beginning near the beginning of lockdown and everything, and it was an interview about people spitting on police officers and stuff, and I think the chief of police was very fair and very reserved in the things that he said about there's no reason for people to be doing these kinds of things. There's but once the interview was over, the interviewer summarized the interview by restating the names that the chief of police had called the other people, calling them degenerates and so forth, as if that was the thing to be taken away from what he had said.
Yeah.
Which I think, which made me a bit angry, because I think no, that paints him as an angry person. If anything, it's ammo for his opposition to call him something of an extremist in his views. Yeah,
and
exactly.
And, you know, it's and again, a lot of it's about, you know, what they don't report rather than what they do, because like there are lots of things occur day to day. A lot of it is pretty non-eventful, you know. I mean, you look outside, you look out your window, what's going on? Terrorist attacks aren't happening. I mean, unless by some miracle you're listening to this podcast as a terrorist attack is happening, in which case, good God, why are you listening to a podcast when a terrorist attack's happening? Go somewhere else.
To calm themselves down.
Yeah. But no, most of the time,
they need to listen to some calming voices.
Not much is happening day to day. And I found this. I've stopped watching news. Maybe once a week I will skim a website. And even then I can get a basic sense of what's going on in the world. So day to day, things are a lot calmer and a lot more civil than they appear. But the type, you know, with the news, it will broadcast this kind of thing, and, you know, it will get you sort of stuck in this kind of reality tunnel where by the end of it, your perspective on the world has been sort of put behind a fisheye lens, and you're not, you know, and then, you know,
where everything's sort of magnified to be out to get you.
Yeah, and you go, you know, you're walking through London, and a guy just stops you in the street, goes, "Excuse me, mate," and you know exactly what's going to happen. They're going to murder you. They're gonna chop up your body, and they're gonna blow up the bits with a chemical weapon and all that stuff. And of course, what's happening is, probably they're saying you drop your wallet, or could you lend us a $5? I'm homeless, or something. Most of the time, most of life is pretty reasonable, pretty normal, and of course where that gets incredibly dangerous, I find, on the global level, is when they start becoming so when you have sort of situations where news starts funneling itself into specific demographics, and they can pose you can have two, we are now in a situation, thanks to the internet, where you can have two people living next door to each other who, for all intents and purposes, live in two entirely different worlds. Where they live in, one person lives in a world where you've got all these racist groups coming over who are threatening to impose neo-fascism on the country, and then you've got the other guy living in the other house where you've got all these loony lefties who are going to impose communism on the world, and they're going to make you share your house with I don't know, some war-torn immigrant or something. It's and you can live in two entirely different worlds just by choosing different stories, and I find that it's worrying to an extent, and it shows the power of storytelling to affect reality simply by ordering the same information in two different ways using slightly different wording. I mean, you can get stuck in the Daily Mail's version of reality. What a hellish reality that would be. But millions of people are. Millions of people are in this world where everyone is some sort of degenerate, or some kind of snowflake, baby who's going to ruin everything, or a would-be terrorist, and you can wake up not thinking, oh my god, I am alive, I am a literal cosmic miracle who by some absolute billion trillion to 1% chance has manifested in this plane with trees and puppies and blue skies, and I get to live in all these sort of different modes and experience the highs and lows of living as a human being. You don't think that. You think, all these politicians in White House, all of these, and they're coming in to steal our jobs, and they're coming in to do all that. I don't know who they are, but they're coming in and they're going to rule the world. And you just, by the way, I want to stress here, I am not, this isn't an attack from above. I was one of those people. I wasn't in the Daily Mail reality world, but I got sucked into conspiracy theories for a while, and I do believe that there is more to this world than what is apparent, but at the same time, you can very easily go so deep that you become convinced that World War III is imminent, or that the whole world is about to fall apart. And I really did. For a long time, I was genuinely of the belief that I wouldn't live much past 40. I might still not live past 40. I don't know. But I was really sort of convinced that I was on borrowed time, and that everything was about to fall apart, and that soon we'd be living in a 1984-esque dystopia. And it got to the point where it literally, the point that I realised this is probably not good for me, I literally wrote a doomsday preparation guide that I then got too depressed to finish. Which I think that's kind of funny in mine. I'm so paranoid that I'm going to write out a doomsday plan, but I can't be bothered to finish it.
Yeah.
So I'm only half prepared for the apocalypse. But it's strange though, as the more that it appears that we've gotten closer to the apocalypse, the more I've been like, you know what? Actually, I'm not as worried anymore. I'm more hopeful for the future now, even though things are materially worse. Because it's like, George Orwell in Down and Out in Paris and London. You spent all your life worrying about going to the dogs, and, well, here they are. Here are the dogs. And you can take it.
Yeah. I feel I feel like my mental health has been much better off for only consuming the news a little bit at a time. But at the same time, I feel like on the flip side, I think the belief that there is so much misinformation out there, the idea that that so many beliefs can't be trusted because we don't live in a knowable objective reality. We live in a universe full of as many subjective realities as there are sentient beings capable of conjuring them. I think it's, while that is something that I believe, I find it in myself being a bit of an embodiment of the old saying, when you don't believe in anything, you can't stand for anything. In that it's very hard to want to be. It's very hard to believe in anything hard enough to be an activist for change that you want to see in the world. And yeah, that's a very recent conversation I've started having with myself, and with a few other people. It's just there's the answer that I've come to so far is, as with anything, there has to be a balance between being cautious of misinformation and doing the research to educate yourself anyway, even if some of that research could be disproved. You've got to be brave enough to take a risk, to
because I think
do what's right.
If you go along the path of doubting absolutely everything, then you are going to end up a bit of a paranoid wreck. You'll get. I think at some point you really have to just kind of just go, all right, I don't think that the news, the mainstream news at least, I don't think that they're quite reporting things, that the way that they report things is definitely dictated by a kind of agenda which is filtered through the lens of, needing views and needing ads and, all this stuff. So obviously you're not going to report certain things because it might upset your advertisers, so on and so forth. But at the same time, you kind of have to trust that what they did report at least has some basis. And that's, I think, really, you've got to at least, you've got to have a little bit of a leap of faith, because I think if you go ahead and just, people say, well, you should make up your own mind, and of course you should, but and you should, looking into alternative sources, for example, on the internet and all that stuff. It's very true. I think really a large problem is we haven't been trained, not in school or anything. We haven't been trained to detect falsehoods or to do your own research. We haven't really been trained in that. You know, when you think about it, so much of school is being sat down in front of a in front of a teacher who just goes ahead and says, these are the facts, this is what is true, that's the end of it. Recite. And a lot of schooling is based on that. And I think if you start the school like that, then of course that's going to carry over into adulthood. Of course it is. Yeah. And I remember actually a good example of how certain truths can be reported faithfully but also edited to fit a kind of agenda. The way I was taught evolution in school is quite it's quite fitting because, for example, the way that I was taught evolution was by the example of trees. So you've got the trees, and they're all in a competition. They're all growing, and the trees at the top, they're the ones who grow the tallest, and they their branches go out and absorb all the sunlight, and it shades the smaller trees. The smaller trees die, the bigger trees win, and that's how evolution works. Trees are getting taller and all that stuff. That is true to an extent. You know, the taller tree, you know, certain species, you know, the weaker ones do die off, so the stronger ones do pass on their genes. That is true, but that is not how nature, you know, that. But the problem is, a lot of people then took that, like for example, the British Empire took that and went like, oh, so the strongest shall survive and the weak shall die. Oh, that means we can go and enslave these people, right? That means we can you know, exploit these countries and all that stuff because social Darwinism and the strongest and better survival of the species. Yeah. We can go and enslave all these people, worry free. It's the way of nature, not our fault. But of course, that's not how the trees work. In the tree analogy, actually, what happens is the taller trees pass down nutrients to the smaller trees, and the fungus take a kind of service transaction, and the leaves falling from the trees feed the soil, which enriches that, and you've got the termites coming in, and it's a collaborative network. So that is not how nature works at all. Nature is a far more sort of anarchic, in the true sense anarchic, you know, without rulers, sort of cooperative, mutually supportive network. So actually the way we were taught it in school is used, you know, was, you know, we were just given the very cut down survival of the fittest narrative, and I think an element of that, at least, might have been due to lack of time, or it might have been due to, but I think perhaps an element of it is that, you know, a lot of it was sort of made in order to suit the interests of the people, you know, the society we're being prepared for, which, you know, is a very, you know, it's a very hyper-capitalist, hyper-competitive sort of system, where if you don't grow to be the tallest tree, and if you don't shade the other trees and kill them off, you're gonna get your head chopped off. It's a and it's, and I'm not being, you know, there is precedent. There is precedence for the you know, these sort of things happening. For example, when Margaret Thatcher took over, I say took over, it makes it sound like she did a coup. No, when she got elected fairly through the democratic process, when Margaret Thatcher took over, she ran a campaign which she altered the curriculum. That was it. She altered the school curriculum to erase the concept of homosexuality. She didn't want it.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, it was basically one of the largest campaigns to just erase an entire, you know, it was like you couldn't even acknowledge that homosexuality was a thing. because any acknowledgement of homosexuality was to promote homosexuality. So you can't talk about it, you can't mention it, and as a result, it created a much, it rolled back a lot of progress in terms of gay rights.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, and so by it's very simple. If you want to, if you want to raise a certain kind of population, then you have to. The education is the first place that you go, because that's where you get your first stories. That's where you get your first your first narratives on the way the world works.
Yeah.
And another thing that was this will be my last one before I pass over. My last, for example, history. History is history is the story of humanity. It's, I think, one of the most important lessons in the curriculum. I didn't do too great at it, but I was very interested by it.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn until years after. My mum was just talking about a series she was watching about Queen Victoria, and she was like, "Oh, and that was at the time of the Charterists, and the Charterists were stomping." And I was like, "Wait, what? Sorry, who?" And she went, "What? You've never heard of the Charterists?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "The Charterists were the group that got working people the vote." And I didn't know about this. We hadn't been taught about it in history. It was a whole sort of civil rights movement in order to get working class people the right to vote, because before then it was just lords. And I hadn't heard that. Or civil rights for black people. When we were taught about that in school, we were taught about the lynchings, we were taught about the KKK, we were taught about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, and it went right up until the point when segregation ended, and then it stopped. The implication, of course, being that racism doesn't exist anymore, which very much you can see nowadays that very much the remnants of that definitely hasn't. But of course, what that did, I think, I find that when I talk about the issue to a lot of people who don't quite get it, it seems to me that it's like the residue of the old story that racism is over stuck in their mind. So like, racism's over, so racism is only a thing that bad people do, and I'm not a bad people, so I can't be complicit in structural racism, and and we all are, because because the systems that we live in are built on this stuff. But of course I can't be part of it, because that would make me a bad person, and I'm not a bad person, so racism can't exist. And you reach this sort of this loop, because the framework that we've been given from childhood, that this was a problem, but now it's over and we're all equal and it's all fine, it's it puts a limiter, it puts a sort of a filter. And if you don't actively work to root those stories out, and you will not again, I am not outside of all this, I am as much inundated with this stuff as anyone else, but you've got to at least try and recognize the filters are there. They're hard filters to find, but it's they're put right from the start, and it's because stories, of course, have power. They have power.
Yeah, I kind of in response to hearing about the Black Lives Matter movements and stuff that has been going on this year, I kind of realized exactly what you've been saying. That I have grown up in. I like to think that I believe in inequality, and that all people have a right to be accepted as they are. All people matter equally. and but because I'd grown up in a small town, gone to school, gone to college, gone to university, in a place where I could count on one hand the amount of non-white people I've probably ever met.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I don't know what kinds of racist ideas I have internalized without realizing it. I don't know what kind of systems I'm complicit in. Just by the belief that I used to have growing up as a child that the that the world we live in today is a peaceful utopia compared to the way things used to be, and that's kind of the story that I think the narrative of history as it was presented to me kind of taught me.
Yeah.
And in fact that's what a lot of things taught me. There's a lot of cartoons and a lot of stories in media that revolve around the idea of something is trying to upset the perfect balance that exists in a world. Yeah,
you don't even think about it.
Yeah, but getting back to the racism conversation, I in response to hearing about all of that and realizing that we have not made as much progress as we have been led to believe, I bought a book called So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. I'm still reading it, but the big thing I am taking away from it so far is that black activists who want to make a change, they want to do it peacefully, but a big obstacle is that they need to talk about the every tiny way that they are put down and made lesser in a way that is comfortable for non-black people to hear.
Because it sucks. Because it sucks to think about this stuff. It sucks to be a kind of, even a liberal. I consider myself a bit more left of liberal, but even for a liberal, it sucks to think of yourself as someone who believes in equality and yet come to the realization that you are complicit in racist systems. And some people can't bear that. Some people can't stomach that because they're just trying to get on with their lives, because they're just trying to think, because they've got a shitty job and they there's already enough concerns about that, and they've got financial concerns and that, and some people are just like, I can't bear to think about another thing that's wrong. Especially when it's something that you are doing but you don't have a clear way out. It's not like, and I think it's what are you going to do? Not pay your taxes? Then you go to prison. And so we're forced to be complicit in it.
It's because it's something that's so big. You're so busy just trying to live within the status quo that you can't even imagine what you can do to change it.
And then you've got you've got politicians again, like Margaret Thatcher, one of my favourite people, who what one of her central slogans essentially was, "There is no alternative. There is no alternative."
Ooh.
That was like her big thing. There is no alternative, and that, I think, has cast, going back to the thing I was talking about last podcast about magic, that cast a very powerful spell on not just the country, but I think the whole world. We've been operating in this sort of it's what author Mark Fisher called capitalist realism, where everyone's just sort of thinks, well, this is it. This is the only way. As he put it, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism, or the end of racism, or the end of anything like that. And so we're sort of, people get this sort of tunnel vision. And again, it's these narratives that get put on things that it's like, well, there was all this stuff, and there were all these different ideas, and they all failed. So it's time to settle down and be reasonable adults and just debate the system as it stands. And
I think the ship has sailed on this this conversation getting too political.
Yeah.
So I think I'll just straight up say that sounds very similar to what Trump is doing nowadays. Everything he says is so much about I am here. I have fixed this thing for you all.
Yeah. just
just
says it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
I want to be a plumber now. I'll be a plumber, and it's like, oh, we've got a leaking toilet. I'll show up, and I'm like, it's okay. I fixed it. You've only just showed up. I fixed it. It's sorted.
Yeah.
You can pee freely now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. So I think let's back away from the abyss before we could sink completely into
before
it.
it looks back.
I've just got the idea now that Donald Trump's just sitting in his White House, and all of a sudden he just suddenly looks up and goes, "Someone's making a rude statement about me." All right, so yeah.
If he had that power, he wouldn't be able to differentiate any other time of day from the time that he is having that feeling.
So maybe he does.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Oh wow. So let's talk about what storytellers can do about this. Because
that's good.
Yeah,
because there's so much.
I've made notes. I made notes about what I wanted to talk about with this one. I'm more organised, and I feel like this is working.
Yes.
So I find, I'll tell you a personal anecdote I found. It's a personal anecdote and a larger political anecdote. I'll go with the larger political anecdote because it'll probably be shorter. So 1983, you got President Ronald Reagan, and he is of the, his organization is of the belief that America needs a narrative. Again, I'd encourage the podcast listeners to watch a documentary, Hypernormalization by Adam Curtis, 2016. It's all about actually political narratives and the way that they have changed and evolved, and how we've sort of reached this kind of stagnated position that we're in now. This is where I'm getting my information from, in part. So Ronald Reagan and his administration believes that America needs a narrative. Doesn't matter whether the narrative is true, it needs a narrative though. It's what's called perception management. It's not about a case of cultivating the truth, it's about making if you will, a suitable lie or a suitable story that the American people can group behind. And so they go to the Cold War. Now, in the 70s, the Cold War was chilling out a lot because the Soviet Union, it was getting a bit flabby. It was getting a bit, its economy was kind of becoming a bit tepid. And so the nuclear arms race in America wasn't doing that great either. So the nuclear arms race kind of petered out, and no one were, the threat of nuclear war, it wasn't gone, but it was certainly a lot less immediate in people's minds. But Ronald Reagan declared the Soviet Union an empire of evil. I mean, that was the literal word he used, an empire of evil. And he ramped up the Cold War quite considerably. Increased his threats, started proposing that we put satellites with laser beams in the sky, literally calling it the Star Wars program. He asked for reports. There were reports that the Soviet Union were secretly building these super high-tech military installations based on satellite pictures that didn't show that at all, but they just kind of went with it. And so he was ramping these things up, and everyone in America, a lot of people in America, were really concerned that he was going to be the one to press the button. He was going to be the one to end it all. And so it was a filmmaker, I think
Nicholas
Meyer, I believe his name was. He directed Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan, I believe. He made a film called The Day After. It was quite a big deal at the time. It was a made-for-television movie, but it starred big Hollywood actors like John Lithgow, Steve Guttenberg, all these people, and the film was about it was like a small-time family, and a doctor, a few people in normal America who get wrapped up in a nuclear war, and the war, the bomb goes off, and the nuclear devastation. And he did his research. He depicted what would happen. He depicted people getting radiation sickness and dying, and the American society sort of falling apart and that. And when the film was broadcast on television, Ronald Reagan apparently wrote in his journal. He watched it. He wrote in his journal, "It was very affecting and left me greatly depressed." And I think the next year there was a treaty signed between the USSR and the USA to reduce, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which basically cooled off the Cold War a little bit, so that the pressing the button became a lot less likely. And I think Ronald Reagan did write to Russ Meyer saying, don't think that your film didn't have any impact on that summit, because it did. And I think and I found, on a personal level, I watched the film like The Day After, but made a year after in good old Blighty, called Threads. And
you've told me about this before.
Yes. Threads is like The Day After, but way more effective. It is like it's the most harrowing thing I have ever watched. It had like half the budget, but it showed everything in such uncompromising detail. It was relentlessly real. It was about a normal family in Sheffield, and it was uncompromising. It didn't flinch for a second, and there was no kind of, with The Day After, it had to end on a bit of a swell, a bit of a, well, that was bad, but, tomorrow is another day. This one, no, there are no more days. Or if there are, they're just going to get worse. You don't get Steve Guttenberg talking to a dying lady, lifting his hat. No, you get a dead baby. Extinction of the human race.
No.
Yeah, and by the end, all the children are like brain dead mutes, or they can barely talk English, and the infrastructure of society's fallen apart. The government barely exists, and it's a totalitarian regime, and it was just so so dark that it genuinely tipped me into a very... It was my real awakening that everything that is could be gone in an instant. And it's what led me on my kind of, to use a modern term, it's what made me a doomer for a while. I was anxious and depressed and paranoid. I was convinced the world was going to end. But from that, a better change of direction came. You can trace a direct path, because it led me to realise that there is a lot wrong with the world. It kicked me out of my complacency. It made me reevaluate things, and it affirmed a lot of my positions on life. And it led me to discover my spirituality. It led me to discover my politics. It was the first domino in a very long chain of events. And I think, I find that is what art can do in its ability to use light, shadow, noise, sound, text, whatever. It can induce, as I said before, it can in the last podcast, it can plug straight into the emotional core and cause people to see the world in ways they wouldn't before, and by doing so change the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And wow, I guess that's that then. Moving on.
let's just sit in that for a while.
Yeah, all right. Lovely. Yeah, but I find it, there is a lot of fiction like that can affect, that has been made specifically to change politics. And I think that's quite interesting. Or George Orwell, 1984, is another great example. He saw a trend in how the world was progressing post-war, and he became genuinely worried about the similarities really between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. And he was thinking, my God, is it really that it doesn't matter whether you're on left or right or whatever, you can use whatever ideology to impose tyranny. I think that was one of the best things I think he ever wrote, was that no one seizes power with the intent of relinquishing it. That really that really hit me. And I think because the dude was in Catalonia during the anarchist revolution. He witnessed the Spanish Civil War. He witnessed it get betrayed by the Soviet Union. He witnessed the fascists win. He witnessed a lot of stuff that went on to shape his perspective. And I think really he in 1984 you can see a very clear warning about the dangers of the human lust for power. And so, and then of course you can't control the way that story, again, please feel free to interrupt me at any point. Just, I will rabbit on for ages if you let me.
Oh no, this is interesting.
Yeah. I was saying, because I was just thinking, you can't control, you obviously, if your story is like, don't do nuclear war, it's very easy to make that story. You can, and people will get it. If you make threads, the message is very clearly and simply, don't do that. With 1984, however, it's a far more diffuse thing. Obviously you have the element, don't do that. Don't make this tyrannical regime. But also, in there is the sort of, one does not seize power with the intent of relinquishing it. We are, he was saying, that he quoted in the book O'Brien, the voice of the tyrannical government, he said, the German Nazis and the Russian communists were like us in many ways, but they lacked honesty. They pretended, perhaps even believed, that they had seized power unwillingly and for a short period of time, and just around the corner there lay a paradise where all men is equal. We are under no such delusion. And I find that really there is a very... It's a far broader message than a lot of people give that book credit for. I think a lot of people, once a piece of art is out there, death of the author. You can't control what happens to it. If you're trying to make a broad point, then some people will use it as a partisan point. You can't control that. That's unfortunately unavoidable. But you will affect. You will get. Orwell gave people a vocabulary for describing tyrannical governments. Doublespeak, newspeak, doublethink, newspeak. Thought crime. These have entered the lexicon on both ends of the spectrum, and it's I'm interested in how the stories can affect things in ways that aren't so obvious.
Yeah. Something I want to ask. What do you think the difference is between movies like those nuclear war movies you've described, in terms of movies that are trying to make a change, trying to make a positive change in the world? What do you think the difference is between them and something like Fern Gully or Birdemic is that are kind of films that people point to as being too transparent and preachy for their own good?
Man, that's one of my notes. Man. I'm glad you brought this up. I think it goes back to what we were talking about in the first podcast, writing from the head, not from the heart. Not from the gut.
Yeah.
Because you will, you will have a message, obviously. Orwell had a message.
Nicholas
Meyer had a message. The director of Threads, Barry Hines, I think, had a message. But they created. They worked from the gut. So even if you have these literal. Even if you have these literal descriptions, like, in The Day After, there's a lot of technical talk about, how long will it take for missiles to reach their target? What's nuclear fallout? All that kind of stuff. Or George Orwell, who wrote an entire appendix about the principles of doublethink or newspeak. But they also created a feeling, in that case, dread. I think the difference is with stuff like Fern Gully and Birdemic, they just write from the head. They just have they think that, just by using the literal facts, then you can, or even, with Fern Gully, it's like, yes, evil man, and the singing gas cloud played by Tim Curry, and these kind of things. But it doesn't.
They have more of a tick box of things to include and portray as evil.
Yeah, and when you do that, you fail to connect. When I'm writing my own book, I'm not saying that this is my that I'm going to be writing a 1984 style classic or anything. But when I was writing The Steel Chrysalis, my book, I found, that it started off as a very corporation bad sort of story. But it was very, class divide bad. But it was just not no, it was not good. It was bad. And so I just thought to myself, okay, well, what's the mentality of the people on the other end? Where do they come from? And the more I sort of thought about it, the more I thought, well, my God, these people are also traumatized. And you create 3D characters, and you create nuance. You create, just by, I mean, you don't even have to be like, well, both sides of the argument equally valid. No, you can portray one side, but you have to be more nuanced. You know, you have to, you know, when I think the most powerful arguments, really, I mean, for example, feminism, one of the big feminist arguments is that patriarchy sucks for men as much as women.
Yeah.
I like that. That's, for me, it might be a bit of a, you know, my male privilege, my male something showing, but when it said patriarchy is bad for men as well as women, I was like, oh, I get what this is now.
Of course.
Oh, of course. Now I'm personally affected. No, but you you need that kind of texture. You need that kind of nuance to bridge the gap. Because otherwise, all you're doing is preaching to the converted. And I find this, you know, a lot of times there are moments, you know, in a lot of fiction where it will all of a sudden be like the character is very slowly turning to the camera. It's like, but don't they realise that if we just reduce the deficit by such an amount, then the amount, and it was just, and it all, you know, they get out a spreadsheet and you know, all that stuff. But life isn't like that. Life's more complicated. Life's more textured. That's all I can say, really. Yeah.
It's, you need to hit people more in the emotional core than you need to hit them in the head.
No one's ever been won over by pure facts. I mean, even if even stuff, environmental factors, some people can say, yeah, I was won over by the facts, I read the research and all that stuff, but that still has to come with a kind of prerequisite feeling of, that's not right. That still has to be there. That feeling of, you know, well, this is worth protecting. Because otherwise, it's just a load of atoms getting moved in one direction, whereas they used to be in another direction. You know, you can't escape. You can't have an argument devoid of emotion, because emotion is literally the hardwiring of our species. It's what we work on. You know, and emotions aren't irrational per se. They can be, but, you know, emotions are merely sort of, emotions are just, you know, stuff like, you know, the life is worth preserving, and it's just that instinct distilled until it's just a feeling.
I think an analogy that's just popped into my head right now is that if facts are the text, then emotion is the highlighter or the underline.
Oh God, yes. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah.
It's how you it's what sticks with you and what you define as important.
Yeah, it's what you pick out, because you can get all the facts in the world. You know, if you got all the information, you know, about a certain thing, and you just got it streamed directly into your head, you wouldn't make a decision any better. You know, all you would have is just sort of a load of mostly irrelevant stuff.
Yeah.
Really, you know, if you're choosing what biscuits you want to eat, it doesn't matter what the chemical composition of the batter or the chocolate is. That doesn't matter at all. It's just going to be a question of, you know, I mean, it might even come down to, I like the name Hobnob.
Yeah. It's a funny name.
That's what it was for me. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. Just the name Hobnob. And then I found it was a nice wheaty biscuit that went very well with tea. Yeah,
it's always a plus.
Always a plus. But and it's, you know, that's, I think, where a lot of artists can tend to go wrong when crafting a sort of again, you know, if stuff like the news and sort of the bad sides of education could be considered illusion spells, I think, you know, the artist really is about dispelling illusions.
Yeah,
it's about, like, you know, it's about shifting your perspective back. I think Marcel Proust in Search of Lost Time made a big point about that. Like, he was saying like the whole book is about a guy trying to find the meaning of life, and he looks in like money, he looks like for like money, doesn't find it. He looks for it in love, doesn't find it. He looks for it in high society, doesn't find it, and eventually he is at a point where he sort of sits down for a cup of tea and a little Madeleine biscuit, and it suddenly carries him back to his childhood, where he we're used to enjoy that sort of stuff. And what he said was that, you know, that we go through life with this kind of veil of familiarity, this kind of illusionary cloak that goes over us at a certain age, where it's like, well, you know, all this sort of the nature and family, you know, really it's a bit, you know, that's just normal. That's just binary reality. No, what you want really is the stuff that goes on top of that. You want the new car, the new house, because, you know, then, or you know, or the really bad stuff. You want to make a legacy. You want to create a dynasty. You spend so long chasing that stuff. You can hold down the fast forward button on your whole life, just tearing forward, trying to get this stuff, and you will miss so much, because that is not what's real. And he said, like, art is sort of what happens when you reapply the childlike perspective. You know, you could look at a load of sunflowers and pass them every day. When Van Gogh paints them, though, when Van Gogh paints sunflowers, you notice the sunflowers. You see the vivid colours and the shape and how beautiful they are. And the next time you see the sunflowers, those aren't just stuff you pass. Those are Van Gogh sunflowers. They are bright and vivid and beautiful. And I think that's really what art at its peak does. But if you just go and use your head to deliver facts through this fiction, you basically have just lopped off a lot of your toolbox. You've eradicated so much, and it robs you. You know, you don't create as an effective bit of art as you had hoped. And in the case of Birdemic, you create something that is enjoyable for a completely different reason.
I think that's the power of art, that it can redefine what's important. That's why representation is important in different kinds of stories, because it's redefining what's important to the audience of those things.
I know what you mean, because I find, you know, a lot of like sort of a lot of art, like, particularly in the Renaissance period, you've got like people who would, you know, want themselves to be in sort of prestige, who would want themselves to be really who wanted to portray themselves as like the lords and the high people. They would hire artists to make very resplendent images of themselves. So again, it's that sort of double-edged, you know, art actually, there's a sort of consensus nowadays that art is kind of frivolous. That it, you know, the old phrase art for art's sake, I find that really, that's such an underselling, you know. The idea that art is some escapist thing that doesn't really impact people's lives.
Yeah,
that it's just
I've known some people who like the only movies they'll watch are war movies and sports movies because they can't connect with anything that doesn't depict their reality. I've known people who don't think very highly of anything fictional because it doesn't have anything, because they believe it doesn't have anything worth saying about anything that's real. But I think that's I don't want to. I mean, people are entitled to their opinions, and I don't want to insult anybody, but I think that's kind of a closed-minded, narrow-minded belief to have, to close yourself off from something, from ideas that can be communicated in more abstract ways than reality can offer.
I find like stuff like the living metaphor.
Yeah.
That's one of my favourite things in stories. The living metaphor.
Yeah.
You know, when you take what is like just a metaphor for an emotional state and you make it like literally true, like my story In Search of Lost Endings, where you know people reach a sort of conclusion to their like a sort of story arc, if it's like a romance thing. When they get together with the girl, poof, they wink out of existence, leaving her the end credit on drifting on the air. And for me, obviously, other people can interpret it in different ways, but for me, a lot of it was about the search for meaning in life.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I called it In Search of Lost Endings as a nod to Marcel Proust, because that's how much of a literary wanker I am. You know, because you search for you're always searching for meaning.
Yeah.
And you're always.
I think if you can't experience the abstract, or you refuse to experience the abstract, then you're only experiencing half of life.
And you fall prey to a lot, because let's face it, it isn't whether or not you take in stories. It's just the only option is what stories do you take in. What stories do you internalize? And I think
exactly.
And I think a lot of the time, you know, if you just leave yourself up to the sort of the status quo to give you the story, then the story they're going to give you is the one of the golden goodie. That there's a big golden goodie at the end of that you've got to just keep searching for. Again, this is what I wrote In Search of Lost Endings about, the golden goodie. You know, the thing. What's the big thing that's going to make it all better? What's the thing that's going to make my life complete? I've got an itch inside of me. I've got like a feeling that I'm not quite complete. What is it going to be? Well, it's romantic love, or it's status, or it's this. And my phone just went off. And
you've got to search for that big thing that's gonna fulfill you, but you've got to search for it within what's conventional, what's come before.
Exactly, and you will, you know, and the golden goodie doesn't exist, or rather, it does, but you already got it the second you were born, because you were born. You know, people. You were born.
The golden goodie was the friends we made along the way.
literally though. I mean, and the thing is though that the you know that for you know you're a miracle. You're a literal. People don't realize this, but every single one of us is a literal miracle. We were created. We were the, you know, of the billions, not to be crude here, but of the billions of sperm that were released, we were the one, you know, one made it. And for that to happen, that process had to be repeated billions of times back through countless generations, all in order to create this one perfect coalescence that is you. So, you know, you've already put in the hard work before you even got here. This is the reward. Life is the reward, and it's painful sometimes. Of course it's painful. But again, it depends on your perspective. You know, I had a moment of introspection when I was feeling miserable. I don't remember why now. That's how insignificant it was. But I don't remember why I was feeling miserable. And then all of a sudden, this little thought dawned on me that, like, hey, I'm here. I'm feeling. I'm feeling miserable, but I'm feeling. And, you know, there were billions of years before I was born where I was feeling nothing at all. There was nothingness. And then all of a sudden, I'm here. And I'm feeling miserable. Or right now, I'm talking and I'm getting increasingly impassioned and I'm sweating bullets. And I'm pretty uncomfortable sitting down right now. But my God, I'm feeling. I'm here. And that just... it blew my mind. And I was like, I want life. I want life in its fullest. You know, and there will be pain. Of course there'll be pain. You know, I'm going to get my heart broken. I'm going to experience loss. I'm going to experience all of that stuff. But I'm also going to experience a lot of good stuff, a lot of good things. But also, that's what I signed up for. That's what life is. You can't have it be all bliss. Have you ever seen a photo that's 100% light? It's just white. It's boring.
Yeah.
It's nothing. You've got to have shade. And so but yeah, you can. Sorry.
The phrase "I didn't ask to be born" gets thrown around a lot when people are unhappy with their lives to a degree that they're wondering what it means for them to exist and be here. But it's life comes in waves. There are high points and low points. And the best way to get through the low points is to remember and have faith that there is a high point on its way.
Yeah.
And not all high points are equal. Not all low points are equal. But it comes in waves, nevertheless.
I also like Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence. Basically, one of Nietzsche's tests was, suppose at the worst moment of your life, the worst, loneliest, most depraved moment of your life, a little devil came up to you and said, this moment, right now as you're living it, it's going to be repeated again and again and again, and it's going to go on and on and on, and all this, all of this pain that you're experiencing, you have felt 1,000 times before, and you will feel 1,000 times again, and nothing will ever change under the sun. Would you fall on your knees and curse that demon and go, "Oh God, you bastard, I can't believe this, is, how could you say this to me?" Or would you
drop kick that demon into the sunset?
That was the original draft.
Yes.
No, or would you look at it and be like, yes, thank you, this is the best news I've heard all day, because that means that, life will occur endlessly, and I will experience all of it, and I will, I can take this. I can take this pain, and because it's life, and it's real, and it's here, and if you do that, then he calls you the Übermensch, the Overman, the Superman.
Okay.
The Superman, if you will. And I think that's that for me is such a beautiful idea. The idea that even in your worst moments, you can still want to live it. You can still want to experience it. I find that profoundly beautiful.
Yeah.
So were we talking about stories or something?
What was this conversation?
I don't know. How did we even get here? I don't.
Yeah.
I feel like, waking up the morning after. How did we get here? Now we're in a bathtub and I've got a tattoo on my face and. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. One thing that I find very interesting in the world, is when these elements of fiction bleed into reality. So a good example here, Alan Moore writes a comic book, Viva Vendetta, in which the climax of that story is a bunch of people in Guy Fawkes masks storm the streets, demanding, there to overthrow the government. And then it's made into a film in 2005, and it shows again a bunch of people in Guy Fawkes masks storming the streets there to overthrow the government. The music swells, Houses of Parliament gets blown up, all that stuff. Then 3 years later, in 2008, the financial recession occurs. The housing market collapses. People are losing their jobs. Everything like that. A recession I think we still haven't recovered from. And then, when that happens, a bunch of people in Guy Fawkes masks, taken directly from the movie, storm the streets all over the world, demanding an overthrow of their governments, or at least a reform.
All right.
Yeah. And I'm fascinated by that. That kind of that sort of, or nowadays Joker. A lot of people are doing clown masks now. Or Grant Morrison, another guy. He's even stranger, because, like, for example, he wrote a version of himself in one of his comic books, right? And then he wrote. Yeah, I know, a bit narcissistic.
I think I've read a few of his Batman comic books.
Yeah, and then he wrote a girlfriend for that character, and then that girl showed up in real life, exactly like what he depicted. Yeah. Then he'd also written his character getting beaten up and sustaining a lot of injuries like in his lungs and that. And then his lungs collapsed and he had to go to hospital and he was connected up to a machine. He was getting blood poisoning. He was going to die.
Ooh. Yeah.
So a lot of... I find it really interesting when it seems like stuff, I was talking about idea space, that, the idea that we exist in sort of physical space and idea space, that stuff bleeds from one to the other.
Yeah, you're talking about things in fiction predicting the future.
Yeah, I mean, or
like the Simpsons depicting Donald Trump as president before, many years before it actually happened.
Yeah. And I think, it strikes me that there is an idea called the morphic field. I'm not sure about the scientific validity of it, but I think it is at least debated. It's at least, somewhere in the idea. Carl Jung talks about it too. The collective unconscious, the idea that human beings actually have a kind of collective mind. Not that we have a hive mind per se, but we have like a kind of a database that we all draw from. And I think there is a sort of idea that if there is something powerful enough, like 1984, for instance, or like Threads, it can drip into idea space, into the collective unconsciousness, and sort of shape the world via that. And you don't even have to really believe in the woo-woo aspects. You can look at it as like, well, people imitate what they see on screens.
Yeah.
People will act like, if you're nowadays, if you're having a romance with a woman, you might think about the romantic films that you've seen, and you might partake in that. and as I say, with people like George Orwell, he gave the world sort of a vocabulary for describing certain things, but also a lot of his predictions have come true. Alan Moore, he wrote in V for Vendetta, the comic book, he wanted a symbol for this oppressive government. And so he thought one of the big symbols would be CCTV cameras absolutely everywhere, on all the street corners, on all the shops and that. And then 10 years later, turned out that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And I think that, Charlie Brooker writes a story called The National Anthem about the terrorists kidnapping a member of the royal family. And if they're saying they'll kill her if the Prime Minister doesn't have sex with a pig live on television. And then...
Excuse me, what?
Yeah, that's the first episode of Black Mirror.
Oh!
Yeah. It's
fun!
Yeah, but then a few years later, an allegation came out that David Cameron did with a dead pig. With a dead pig's head.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were interviewing. I remember an interview with Alan Moore about that, because at the time Charlie Brooker was saying, "I am literally terrified right now that all of the stuff I've written is going to come true." And they brought up the pig example to Alan Moore, and he said, "Well, if he didn't want it to happen, he shouldn't have written about it." And I think that's quite. I'm fascinated by the idea that that a powerful enough concept, a powerful enough idea, can sort of ripple out. And I mean, obviously, the David Cameron allegation, the time that he allegedly did that was way before the National Anthem was written. But you still see a lot of just a lot of stuff like the V for Vendetta thing, where it bleeds out and affects reality. And I'm just wondering, what your thoughts on that might be, because I want to know if I'm crazy.
I know a lot of people might call it crazy, but to someone who believes in like a semi-spiritual like idea space, like we've been talking about, I think it's not too far-fetched. I mean it's pretty far-fetched, but it's
in the terms of far-fetched things, it's not the most far-fetched.
Yeah, it's in a space where we don't really know what's going on. It's not out of the question.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think it's in to a very, very small extent, everyone who has ever written a story could be part of a great big Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, I mean, we do. We all collectively shape the world together. I mean, even in terms of just like what we say to each other, you can give someone a really bad day.
You can give someone an existential crisis with one word.
Yeah. I don't know what word, but
yeah.
No, you can. I mean, you can really, and it doesn't even take that. It just takes an eye gesture. It just takes the tiniest thing, and it's like, we're existing in this sort of perpetual echo chamber of this feedback loop, where it's like this shifting, churning mass of everything. And we can really, I don't think people realize quite how powerful they are. I think that's the enriching thing about really understanding the nature of stories. It's that you realize you're actually a lot more, you can change things a lot more than you think. And this is my thing. A philosophy I've come to believe: the world as it stands. Have you ever heard of Gabor Mate?
No.
Well, Gabor Mate is a professor. He studies trauma and addiction. And what he found is that addiction is a lot more common than we think, because it's, it doesn't have to be addiction to drugs. It can be addiction to shopping, work, sex, all sorts of things that we don't even really consider addictions right now. But also the people who run the world, a lot of them are really traumatized. That's the reason a lot of people search for power. A lot of the reason people want to accrue more stuff and more power and more status is because they are feeling a lack inside themselves.
They're feeling, they might not want to admit it, because admitting it in itself is an act of vulnerability, but they are insecure about not being in the best place.
yeah. And because it sucks. Because this goes back. It sucks to look into this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But my thought is, if that's true, then really, the way that we view the world, the way that the world is right now, is the end result of a long string of chain reactions. So, for example, you think back at the origins of humankind. We were the lowest on the rung. We were a bunch of hairless, defenseless apes with no claws, no stingers, no anything. We had sticks. We had little sticks, and we were sort of, we were sort of huddling together up in the trees or in caves as, the massive mega bears and saber-toothed tigers were prowling outside ready to rip us to shreds. And I think we're descended from those people. We're descended from the ones who didn't get ripped to shreds. We were descended from the ones who listened to their friends get ripped to shreds. We're descended from the most jittery, nervous, terrified people. And that trauma is still baked into the heart of what we are. And it can get passed down. An abusive parent. Sometimes it sucks, but sometimes the child will become an abuser as they grow older, because they think, in their head, the only way to not be abused is to be the abuser. And someone, or the opposite way, someone who was mistreated will become too passive in adulthood and will do damage to the next generation in that way. And so it's sort of, when you think about it, the whole of human history is kind of this long string of tragedy on top of tragedy, tragedy begetting tragedy begetting tragedy. But the opposite is also true. Triumph can beget triumph can beget triumph. And every generation you can pass down a slightly softer punch. Yeah. And every generation, there are more opportunities. There are more, we've got the internet now. There are more ways to connect, more tools to gain. And so when you tell stories, indeed, not just, you don't even have to be an artist necessarily. When you just tell your own personal story, just by telling a slightly different story instead of the one that is ascribed to you, which is like, limited resources, limited this, limited everything, gotta compete, gotta fight. Try telling yourself that this is Eden in disguise. Try telling yourself that this is paradise, that, actually everything is exactly as it should be, and we've got struggle to go through, and we've got all this stuff to go through, but that doesn't mean, a struggle doesn't mean a fight. Not necessarily. Yeah. And that we can, that a better world is possible, and that you are not bad, that you are not worthless, that you are capable of being so much more. And just to tell different stories like that, you not only stop your the chain reaction that might have continued, because life, I think, has a sort of autoplay feature. Life will continue in a certain direction unless you make a decision to change it, and you can change it for yourself. And then when you do that, you irradiate that out to others, and so it helps you help others. and others help you, and you start more positive chain reactions until eventually there may well come a time when the sum total of positive chain reactions outweighs the sum total of negative chain reactions, and in that case, well, you've got a party on your hands.
Yeah, feelings are not a product of stimulus in our environments. They are not a product of what is actually happening to us. They are a product of how we think about the things that are happening to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like Buddhism, isn't it?
So, yeah, that's the three principles. That's what my dad talks about in his life coaching stuff. It's so you can remind yourself that that the good in the world can equal or outweigh the bad, but people tend to remember the bad more because it hits you more in the emotions.
Because we're descended from the jittery cavemen who were watching their relatives get ripped to shreds, and it's like that was what they needed to survive. They needed that, that negativity bias.
Yeah, but if you look for the good, you'll pretty much, if you truly look for the good, and you want it, you can usually find it.
Yeah. And if you tell stories, if you are an artist, and I've had this sort of thing. I've had moments when I'm laying in bed at night and I'm thinking, oh, what am I doing? There's like real oppression going on out there. There's like real struggle. There are people you ought to be marching on the streets or hiding in a tree if you really want to change the world. What are you doing here? Just writing a little story about, oh, it's a magical world where people poof out of existence, or, whatever I'm writing about. Oh, grow up and get out of here. What do you think you're going to do? You're going to publish a little book and it's going to make the whole world better. Oh, yeah, like your bloody Jesus or something. Even his book didn't fix the world, and that's like one of the big tenets. That's like one of the big ones that they go to. but
it's like the best-selling book ever.
Yeah, it's like the best-selling book ever. It's the book, like, that and the Quran and the Tao and whatever Buddha's book is. I don't remember what the title of that was. The Bhagavad Gita. All of those books, they wrote them with some of the most powerful teachings in the world still getting transcribed over years, and that's still the world's the way it is. So what do you think you're doing by just writing a little story? But it's not even about that. It's not that you expect a story or a painting or a podcast or a song.
You don't expect it to change the world.
You expect what you can hope for is that it'll change someone.
Yes, it has a chance of changing someone.
You will, just let if you'll permit me to go woo woo one last time. I promise this will be it, because I feel like we might be wrapping to a sort of conclusion here.
Yes, it's been 1 hour and 30 minutes probably.
Oh, great. Yeah, if you just allow yourself to connect to whatever it is out there, be it idea space, whether you want to call it idea space, the collective unconscious, whatever, it's a bigger thing with more wisdom than you, and you don't have to, just get out your own way, right from the gut, do what you can, do what you think is right, and fire it out in the world like a message in a bottle, and you just hope that it'll reach someone. It will do what it is meant to do. Whatever ends up happening is what was meant to happen. And whether that's it changes, policy like the day after, or it changes one person's life who then goes on to start another little chain of positive actions. Whatever it is, what is, like, the last line of Cloud Atlas, I think. What is an ocean except a multitude of drops?
Yeah, I think it's a lot like a lot of the defenses for against coronavirus that the pandemic that we're living through right now.
Oh yeah, that old thing.
Yeah, masks and self-isolation and social distancing and all that. None of them are guarantees that you'll be safe. But the reason we use them is because each little thing, they all have a chance of protecting us, a chance that stacks with each cumulative thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well then, I think. Woo!
Is that what we're going to end it?
I think we're basically done here. I've got. Let me just have a look at my notes. Yeah.
I am simultaneously exhausted and restless.
I am. Yeah, that was amazing, wasn't it? That one.
Yeah.
Christ. Anything you want to wrap up with?
Are we going to call this episode "Whoops, We Did a Politics"?
I had a different title in mind. We'll discuss it.
Oh, what was your title?
How Stories Change the World.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, man.
Yeah. So.
I don't even know where that last monologue came from. I don't even know where that last big speech I did. I don't even know where that came from. That was just spewing out of me. Most of what I said actually was just spewing out of me.
It came from Idea Space, man.
Yeah, man. Came from Idea Space.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is probably where we'd end it.
Yeah. Run with scissors, kids.
Run with scissors, kids. That was Sam Sibahovsky, once again, of Sam Sib Stories, wowing us once more with his cool demeanour and quiet intellectualism, I think. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did enjoy it, then give it a follow or a subscribe. I'm not quite sure what the terminology is. I'm still new to podcasts. Check out my YouTube channel, That Chat Paul, for more such content. And I'll see you all next time. Love you.